Are you tired of the 9-to-5 lifestyle? Do you want more freedom to do what you want, when you want it, without sacrificing your current income? Then this is the show for you. Every week, we dive into John's journey towards financial freedom and everything he has learned since 2014. Real estate investing, cryptocurrency, stocks, private lending, foreign residency, tax saving strategies, infinite banking, assets protection, and much more. Now, here is your host, the founder of the Wealth and Freedom Nexus, John Rickgarn.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when you're listening to this. This is John Rickgarn, your host again of the Wealth and Freedom Nexus podcast. Today's guest is Marco Santarelli, who also is a host of a very popular podcast, Passive Real Estate Investing. If you have not had a chance to listen to that, I would definitely recommend it. It is on my recommended podcast page on my website. Myself, I've learned a lot from Marco over the last 7 years as I have pursued my real estate journey. But besides a podcaster, Marco is an investor, an author, an entrepreneur, and the founder of the Norada Real Estate Investments, which is an Inc. 5000 company, but is also a national real estate investment firm that is offering or offers turnkey properties for investors, clients, customers in many, many growth markets throughout the United States. Now, Marco himself has did purchase his first real estate investment at the age of 18. So I kind of wanted to bring him on to share his journey and his story and how he helps other investors pursue a path to passive income and financial freedom. So with that, Marco, welcome to the show.
Hey, John, it's a pleasure to be on your show. Congratulations on your new podcast, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So now for people that aren't maybe familiar with yourself and maybe Norada Real Estate, could you just give a brief background of how you yourself got into real estate investing and then how that kind of grew into the business that you formed after that?
Yeah, so just to give you kind of a quick history, people kind of are amazed when I tell them I bought my first property when I turned 18 years old. But I kind of knew as a mid-teen that I that was the path to wealth and financial freedom, because I recognized other people in my life that had that luxury or achieved that level of freedom. And so I thought, well, okay, obviously there's proof right there. And so I took it upon myself to start reading books and studying real estate and entrepreneurship and whatever else I could about money. I just found money a fascinating subject because I wanted to learn about it. And back then I wanted to be, rich, quote unquote, but the reality is it's free, to have time freedom, but you can't have time freedom without financial freedom. It absolutely helps a lot. And so that's the path I set. And so I had a good paying job at a grocery store. I saved up enough for the down payment. And then when I was of legal age, I could qualify for financing. And that's when I bought my first townhome property. Needed a little bit of work, fixed it up, but I, put a sign in the front yard. There was no internet back then. So, it was all newspaper and signage. Sure. But, I leased it and I managed it. And that was my first real estate investment. And, the saying is the writing's on the wall, but that is when I just continued to go down that road and continue to educate myself, which is, a huge factor and biggest piece of advice I can give anybody. But I continued to buy property slowly at first. And then as the years went by, I accelerated that. But that's how I got into real estate investing is, as a late teen. But then when you fast forward into early 2000s, like 2003, 2004, I really pushed the gas pedal hard and I was going all in on real estate full time. Okay. And that's when people were coming to me asking for help, coaching, mentoring, whatever it might be. And I had to apologize and say, I don't have the time for that. I'm just doing too many deals and flying around the country. And so that's when the light bulb moment went off and I started, the company 18 years later. In fact, this is our 18th year anniversary is this month, January.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Yeah. So people were saying, hey, can you help me? And I said, I'm sorry, I can't, but I see a lot of deals. I have a lot of deal flow and I can just pass that on to you. And that's really how the business was born. That was the light bulb moment.
All right. Interesting. So with that being said, and obviously you and your team have expanded out nationwide. I know you've, connected investors to, Memphis, Birmingham, Atlanta, Indianapolis, just a few places off the top of my head. How many investors have you helped or, connected with properties or, started their path to financial freedom?
I wish I had a specific number to answer your question. I know it's in the thousands. So how many, I don't know, because it's been 18 years. And,
Hmm.
just last year alone, we sold over 1,000 properties
Oh,
through
wow.
our network. So investors come to us and they'll buy 1, 2, 3, 4 a year. It really depends on their capacity. Capacity meaning that it comes down to available cash for down payments and credit. If you have cash and credit, you have the ability to invest in real estate.
Hmm.
So those are the two things that people should be focused on. But for those that have the capacity, they're buying as many as they can, as fast as they can. Sometimes it's only 1 per year. Sometimes
Okay.
it's 10 a year, but that's pretty rare. I think it's probably between 2 and 5 per year per investor that we work with.
Okay. And for those listening, if this is your first time joining us, or hopefully not the first time, if you've been with us from the start, we'll be having some mortgage lenders that are going to be joining us on the podcast in later weeks as far as talking about the qualification process to qualify for an investor loan. So be sure to stay tuned for that. One thing about Norada, Marco, and I kind of just wanted to clarify, you've obviously, built a huge network across the United States, but then you are basically connecting investors to other turnkey operators. Is that correct? Like, you're not the one, Marco's not going out buying the property, fixing it up himself and putting it on the market per se?
No, we're not. There was a period of 3 years where we were involved in acquiring distressed assets, fixing them up, and providing them
Okay.
through us to our clients as turnkey rentals. That is a completely different business. It's a lot of work, a lot of brain damage, and sometimes it's not profitable. No matter what you see on HGTV or
Yeah.
A&E, those flipping shows can be fun and sexy, but there's a lot of places where you actually lose money. You don't make money on every deal, and it's a
Hmm.
lot of work. So it's the business we tried and got back out of.
Okay.
So what we've created is a business model where we are your primary point of contact. Think of Norada Real Estate Investments as the hub of a wheel, and
Okay.
everything and anything you could ever want is a spoke on that
Okay.
wheel. So whether it's not just the properties, but it's the education, the free education we provide, it's the financing options, multiple financing options. Even if you have trouble qualifying for conventional financing, we have options that are non-conventional loans that can get you financing for real estate.
Okay.
Asset protection attorneys, tax advisors, self-directed IRA companies, even financing within a self-directed IRA, inspectors, title companies. Basically, the whole ecosystem is available through us. So we essentially are your primary point of contact, and then we bring in the other people that you need based upon where you're investing, your needs, your wants, and your goals.
Okay.
So that would include lenders, that would include various builders that we have partnerships with or joint venture relationships with. We just call them providers. You call them turnkey providers.
Sure.
But all of our properties that we sell are essentially turnkey. There's nothing that you need to buy to fix.
Okay.
All the work is done, or it's new construction, and you're just walking into a ready to go performing asset.
Okay. All right. Good to know. I'll just kind of briefly share a story I had when I first started getting into real estate. There was a company on the East Coast. I won't name names, but connected with them. They're like, yeah, we can help you find a property. And we were looking at St. Louis, Missouri. So I got referred to someone, and they were in Utah. And I thought that was kind of odd. It's like, okay, well, maybe they have a satellite office there. And talked to the guy in Utah. Then they referred me to a property management company in St. Louis. They weren't actually a turnkey provider. So then on top of that, it's like, okay, well, I'd have to find a property, but okay, we'll touch base and talk to this property management company. Overall, I was very unimpressed. My wife was not too happy with them either. They kind of dodged a lot of questions we asked and just didn't feel they were a very professional outfits. So at that point, I was kind of like, all right, I only want to work directly with the, provider themselves. I don't want to have to deal with any middlemen. That being said, since you have had your large network with, lenders, providers, financiers, etc., over the last 18 years, has there ever been a partner that you've cut ties with? And if so, what were the circumstances?
Well, definitely, there's been more than one.
Okay.
I would say we probably cut ties with one company, whether it be a property management company or a property provider, about once a year.
Okay.
Definitely once every 2 years, but maybe once every year. And it's for various reasons. Sometimes their communication becomes very poor. They become lazy. They don't service clients like they were once before.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons that happened at one time is because they're acquired by another. And so they just kind of got lazy. They just didn't feel that they had to keep pushing the envelope and provide, excellent customer service. They knew they were going to be bought out. It was, a merger or acquisition. For whatever reason, sometimes these things happen. They just go sideways, or sometimes something happens to the owners and they just have a change of heart. Their heart and their mind isn't in the business, and they're
Mm-hmm.
off doing other things, and so they're not focused and putting their attention in that business. But the point is when performance or the service drops off, or the quality of the product, as in the properties, dies off, we ask questions. We look into it and get involved and find out what's going on.
Okay.
And if it's not resolvable, sometimes it involves a slap on the wrist. But if we can't resolve the problem, then we basically part ways,
Okay.
mutually or otherwise. But we only want to work with people that provide great service to our clients. And that's one of the major benefits of working with a company like ours is, we're essentially vetting people all the time, and we're only
Mm-hmm.
going to work with people that we want to work with, that we like working with, that are going to provide you value and service. And so if we're not comfortable referring those people to you, we're not going to work with them.
Okay.
This kind of spills over into the whole market concept. One of my 10 rules of successful real estate investing is to be market agnostic.
Mm-hmm.
I take that one step further and say, well, we're going to be not just market agnostic, but we're going to be provider agnostic, and provider as in service provider agnostic. So we're not married to any one company or one market or one brand or one business or one type of property. It really is just going to be, what are the best options for me and for you at that time?
Okay. So, and I suppose that being said, probably another benefit for the investor working with the Norada, then he can kind of tailor it to whatever, their needs are, being market agnostic. If someone says, I want the fastest appreciating property, but they're looking at Memphis, and it's like, well, Memphis isn't exactly known for that. But then likewise on the flip side, well, I want cash flow, but I want to invest in, I don't know, Dallas, Fort Worth, or I don't know, Miami, Florida, or someplace where, you might be having double digit capital appreciation, but probably not much for cash flow. But I'm guessing you and your team can help individual investors, tailor what they're looking for and then provide the best option and service for them.
You just hit the nail on the head. That's exactly it. Every investor is different. They're going to have different needs, wants, and goals.
Okay.
And if you, as an investor, come to me saying, I'm looking for maximum appreciation potential, my team of investment counselors are going to recommend a certain set or list of markets that we operate in, that we can provide property in,
Okay.
that are experiencing very strong growth, that will provide you that appreciation. If on the flip side you come to us and say, I'm not so much concerned about strong appreciation, I'd like to have it, but at the same time I want to maximize my cash on cash returns.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then there's a different set of markets that we operate in that we're going to recommend, because you're going to get better cap rates and cash on cash returns in lieu of, those stronger appreciation rates that you're going to see in a market.
Okay. So, all right. Yeah. I think everyone's a little bit different. I know, some people might still be a little stung from the Great Recession when property values tanked. I myself am more of a cash flow investor, but I mean, if appreciation comes along, I'm definitely not going to pass it down. So,
right.
But you had mentioned with financing partners, and I know Norada's been around for 18 years, providing investment properties, but you've also started shall we say, another business of providing funding for investors, especially if they're capped at the, 10 loans or 20 if you're married. Can you tell us a little bit more about that business and how that works?
Yeah. So your audience understands there's really two basic camps of financing. You've got conventional mortgage financing and non-conventional mortgage financing. So your conventional mortgage financing is essentially what you get from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. It's through the government sponsored entities. And this is the cheapest mortgage financing you're going to find out there. It's basically government subsidized. But these are mortgage loans that provide the lowest mortgage rates you're going to find pretty much anywhere.
Okay.
It's just by default, that's the way it is because it's coming from a government sponsored entity. However, the problem with that is you're only capped at 10 per person per credit score.
Mhm.
So little tip for your audience is, if you're married and you both qualify for financing, don't be investing together, invest separately.
Mhm.
Only one person should be qualifying for the mortgage and putting their name on that mortgage loan, because then you free up your spouse or your partner to get 10 more. So theoretically, you can have 20
Okay.
per couple.
Okay. Good to know.
So those are conventional loans, right? That's your starting point, because that's going to be your cheapest form of financing. Now, you do have to qualify, so there's certain requirements that you need for that. But if you don't qualify for that, but you still have good credit, a good credit profile, or you've capped out on your 10 conventional loans, you go to your second option, plan B, if you will. And that's where you start getting loans that are what are referred to as non-conventional or non-qualified money loan, non-QM.
Okay.
And that's where my other company comes in, which is Norada Real Estate Funding, because what we provide you with are non-QM or non-conventional loans, essentially to infinity, meaning that theoretically you can have as many of those as you want. There's no
Okay.
limit as long as you qualify for them.
Sure.
And the nice thing about that is the qualification criteria is typically less stringent than your
Okay.
conventional financing, but you still need to qualify. But we do look at you and your credit profile, but we also look at the property as well. So there's different factors that go into play. We could also finance people from foreign countries like Canada, the UK, Australia, wherever
Oh,
else.
okay.
So it's not just limited to US residents or US citizens. The terms are very similar. Like you can get 30-year fixed rate mortgages, but you can also get adjustable
Okay.
arms like a 5, 7, 10-year adjustable rate, which is lower. You can even do interest only if you really want to maximize your cash flow.
Sure.
So you minimize your monthly payment, your debt service, as low as possible. Keeping in mind that you're not amortizing the loan at that point. So you might, have interest only for a fixed period of time, like 10 years, at which either refinance or start paying principal.
Sure.
But it provides you other options. So it's a great plan B or a backup to when you max out your conventional loans.
Okay. Good to know. Yeah. And at the time recording, a total of 14 or people from 14 countries have downloaded and listened to my podcast. So I think that's definitely probably a good tip if they're, talking
great.
to different financing partners that only can obviously help someone in the US. Now with the non-QM or, non-conventional loan, as I understand it, that way it looks more at the property numbers, like how well does the property cash flow, where I know in the conventional space, they're very, I don't want to say hung up, but there's a lot of emphasis on your debt to income ratio, irregardless of how the property is doing.
It doesn't look at the property more than you. It looks at
Okay.
both of them. As long as you've got decent credit and you don't have numbers that are really out of whack, you're probably going to qualify.
Okay.
It's now, mind you, if you just filed for bankruptcy in the last 12
Sure.
months, that probably won't work. But the forgiveness on that is lower. Like you can get financing, you can start to get financing after 1 year, and especially after 2 years of filing for a bankruptcy.
Oh, okay.
Whereas with conventional financing, you have to be outside of a 7-year window.
Ouch.
So it's things like that make it a little easier to qualify. But the credit score requirements aren't as high.
Okay.
You don't need necessarily as much in reserves, cash reserves. Now, the one main difference is the interest rate, between those two mortgages. Everything else being equal, like all else being equal, is going to be a little bit higher. It
Sure.
could be anywhere from like 1 percentage point higher, which is not a big deal, to as much as 2 or 3, just depending on 5 factors, 5 levers, that I like to call it. So you can buy down that rate. You can pay points up front
Sure.
and buy that rate down where it becomes very competitive. So there are ways around that.
Okay.
But if you've got a sketchy profile but you still qualify, you're going to pay more of a rate than you would with conventional financing. I mean, that should be pretty obvious to you because you're considered a higher risk borrower.
Sure. Yeah. And then obviously with the conventional side, they may just flat out deny you, where here's an option for this.
Right.
Now, are these the non-QM, is this solely for investor or non-owner occupied homes, or could this potentially be a path for, say someone that wants to be a home buyer, but maybe does have a sketchy credit score or bankruptcy? Okay.
It's you can use it for both. Most of the people we talk to, virtually all of the people are real estate investors. They're looking to buy income producing property
Sure.
other than their principal residence, right? It might be a second home because of the people we talk to, they're investors.
Mm-hmm. Yep, makes sense. So, and then as far as the loans, are there, minimums and maximums for either the property value or the loan amounts that you lend out on, or?
Actually, that's a very good question. I forgot to mention that, but thanks for the reminder. So
Sure.
yeah, generally speaking, we don't want to see properties that are below $100,000.
Okay.
So that's not a huge hurdle for most people, unless you're looking in, very small tertiary markets or, like
Class D properties that no one wants to touch.
D neighborhoods.
Sure.
So that's usually not a problem. But
Okay.
yeah, typically 100,000 is that threshold. There are exceptions that can be made, but it just depends. Yeah.
Okay. And then the flip side, is that just capped at single family up to fourplexes or up to a certain dollar amount, or is there not a cap on the upper end part of it?
It's generally a 1 to 4 unit property, what we
Okay.
consider in the lending world as residential, one, 2, 3, and 4 unit properties.
Sure.
That doesn't mean that we can't do loans on small multi-unit properties or commercial property. We can. It's just we don't advertise it or talk about it because it's a little bit more of a niche area. It requires a different type of appraisal.
Sure.
It's a longer loan process, but it's still doable. But if it's residential, it's a residential commercial, meaning that there are small apartment buildings or multi-unit dwellings, those can be done.
Okay. Sounds good. And just a tip to my listeners, I actually learned about this on another podcast. I think it was someone down in Florida. So obviously Marco and I have talked about where 10 loans individually are maxed out. If you're married and both of you qualify for financing, then you can get up to 20 with the lowest interest rates. In theory, and I know one guy is working on this, you could get up to essentially 24 plexes. So essentially 80 units would be the absolute top amount, that if you're looking for that, 30-year fixed, low 3s, mid 3% rates at the time of this recording, that is one way around it. I know a lot of people just think of single family as one door, but Freddie Fannie guidelines, they actually consider 1 to 4 units as a quote single family home. So just a little tidbit for anyone out there that's looking to get started or wanting to maximize their leverage as much as they can. With that, Marco, we're recording here in January, and this will be published the first week of February. What other, or are there any big projects or new markets that Norada is looking into for 2022 and beyond? Or
yeah, actually, I was on a call with one of my builders shortly before my recording with you here.
Okay.
And he just tied a bunch of land in Southwest Florida to build 35 new construction fourplexes. This is actually a project that I might be joint venturing with him on, just because I love the location so much and the project. And I know what he can build. I'll call him my friend. I've known my friend for a number of years, and he's a high quality builder. So I might be, looking at purchasing some of those fourplexes for myself personally.
Okay.
But there's 2 projects we're looking at. Both are in Southwest Florida. So as far as 2022, we're going to expand our footprint in Florida, particularly the western coast and the Southwest, just because there's tremendous growth going on there. There's a lot of population growth. There's a lot of jobs. It's just a very solid market. But I mean, you can make that argument for Florida as a whole.
Sure.
The southern states, but particularly on the eastern half, is where we want to increase our footprint. The southeast in general, just because the numbers make sense, as long as we can get inventory and we have the right inventory in the right markets where we want to grow into. There are pockets in the Northeast. The challenge with some of the places in the Northeast is the economy is a little bit depressed.
Sure.
But there are still a lot of great markets, throughout the country that make sense. You just don't want to be in expensive markets like tier 1 markets in San Francisco, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., some of the New York state cities.
Mm-hmm.
The numbers just don't make sense. It's unaffordable, it's overpriced, and the rents aren't high enough to cover your expenses and your debt service. So why bother looking there?
Yeah, and I would definitely add and probably argue, at least myself personally, Illinois and New Jersey are 2 that I tend to steer away from with their high taxation and I always say pension issues. I mean, eventually that bill is going to come due. They look to the taxpayers and, if your property tax goes up 50%, there's, 50% reduction in your cash flow that you have to worry about at that point.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah. And, not to be political or anything, but often you will find that blue cities and blue states tend to have the worst rates of return on real estate.
Yeah. And I definitely have seen that myself. And I, not that I look up a political map and say I will only invest in, red states. I mean, Minnesota here, we're considered a quote purple state. I have a couple properties here. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a New York or a California by any means, but if for a beginning investor, I would say there's other states that are more advantageous than Minnesota. Land of 10,000 taxes, as we call it. So,
yeah, exactly. And I noticed that your shirt is purple and your backdrop is purple.
Yeah, no, well, that's actually my logo colors, but yeah, I never thought of that connection there too. So yeah, I use it as one of for the Wealth and Freedom Nexus, connecting point of freedom and wealth, and just worked out well. So we're wrapping this up here, Mark. Any of my listeners are, listening to this and maybe want to, take a deep dive, either educating themselves or maybe they're ready to, purchase their first property. What's the best way to reach out to you and your team?
Yeah. So, I mean, to kind of continue the education that you're providing with your podcast here, I mentioned loosely before my 10 rules of successful real estate investing. That's kind of a sticky post on our website blog.
Okay.
And it's always at the top. So, people can dive into that because there's a lot of good, good information there for people as a kind of a starting point, if you will. Like first one being educate yourself. We mentioned one already, and that is, be market agnostic and how important that is. The best deals are not necessarily in your backyard.
Right.
And I talk about, speculation versus cash flow, taking a top-down approach, maintaining control and stuff like that. So it's a quick read, but it's a very good read.
Okay.
And in addition to that, we've got our ultimate guide to passive real estate investing. It's been downloaded tens of thousands of times. And I probably should update that just to, for the decade going forward. But that's also a free download on our websites.
Okay.
But, the answer to your question as far as, reaching me and my team and finding out more about what we do and the education we provide is all free, by the way.
Okay.
And the services is at noradarealestate.com, NORADA, noradarealestate.com. And I might also add that the sister website to that is the home of my podcast, which is passiverealestateinvesting.com.
Okay.
They link to each other, so you could bounce back and forth.
Okay. And for those listeners, you're driving, working out, walking the dog, whatever, all the links will be in the show notes, so you don't have to hit rewind and grab a pen and try to write that out. And I myself can attest the Ultimate Guide to Real Estate Investing. I think I read that back in, let's say, late 2014, early 2015. I still refer back to this day. So it's very, very good read. Definitely a lot of information in there. So, well, with that, Marco, I want to thank you again for joining us on the podcast. And unless there's any last tidbits you want to share to my listeners that are starting their journey for passive investment and essentially financial freedom.
Just two quick ones. One, like I said, my first rule of successful real estate investing is educate yourself. So keep listening to podcasts like yours, John. You read books, they're very inexpensive. It's the cheapest form of education you get. There's a lot of good information online. Just be careful. There's a lot of bad information too.
Right.
But never stop educating yourself. That's huge. And then, you asked me something before we started recording here, where we see, investing in the markets in 2030. Which is like eight years from now. The simple answer to that is you could call it common sense, but the simple answer to that is this. I can't give you a specific market, although I could probably guess some of them.
Okay.
But if you think about it this way, look at demographics and trends and look at where there is population growth and job growth. If you follow, like the old saying, follow the money, but it's the same thing, same principle applies. If you follow the jobs and you follow the population growth, you will know in advance where real estate will continue to flourish, where you'll have a healthy housing market, where you'll see price appreciation, because those jobs bring in people, that migration brings people in, and they need a place to live. That's real estate. Where are they going to live? You need to provide housing. So that means there's going to be more demand. You need supply to keep up with it. And that is where you get that growth in housing. So follow population trends and follow job trends, like job growth. Those are the areas that you want to be focused on.
Sure. And I might just add one more tidbit in there. I would probably stress diverse job growth. And I only say that because it was only, I think 10 years ago, North Dakota was just absolutely booming because, oil was $130, $140 a barrel. So everyone was fleeing, investing, and building in North Dakota.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then oil plummeted down to the 20s and they capped a lot of wells and a lot of companies just packed up and left. So, obviously job growth is good, but if there's more diverse industries, science, technology, et cetera, obviously I think that'd be a, benefit as well.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It has to be sustainable job growth.
Sounds good. Well,
So
again, I'll have links to all these resources here in the show notes. And again, Marco, thank you for your time and coming on to the podcast.
Thank you so much, John. Keep up the good work. I'm looking forward to hearing this episode live from the other ones too.
Will do. Thanks, Marco.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to share, rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. For more updates, check out www.wealthandfreedomnexus.com. Remember, nothing on this show should be considered tax, legal, investment, or professional advice. This show is produced solely for educational and informational purposes. Please consult an appropriate and licensed tax, legal, real estate, or business professional for specific advice for your situation. For distribution or publication rights or media interviews, please contact the host.